Hey everybody, it's Lenora from It's a New Dawn. How is everybody doing today? So, I am doing a lot of recordings coming up. It is October, it's the 10th of October 2020. And by the time this one comes out, I'm going to try to do weekly for a while. I'm shooting for every Friday and maybe put in a little health and wellness tidbit in there in between. That that's my goal. Um, I put a little post in Facebook and I got a nice response, and so I have some really interesting people lined up for the next couple of months. So I'm really excited. Today I'm sitting down with George Sirois. Sirois. Yes. Okay. His little bio. Now, mind you, everyone, as you know, I don't know anybody that I'm sitting down with, really, unless I tell you that I know them. I don't. But that's what makes it exciting for me also, because when I sit down with this person, I'm learning about them too as I'm sitting here, and it's really great. I've had some really great interviews, or not interviews. I'm sitting down with the people, and it's nice and casual. I have my lemon drink, it's casual and it's beautiful and I love it. Anyway, George is the author of the international best-selling young adult science fiction novel, Excelsior, its 2 sequels, and the 5-part science fiction sports serial From Parts Unknown. He served as president of the Missouri Writers Guild from 2017 to 18, and is the host and producer of the podcast Excelsior Journeys and From Duck Till Dark, outside the Marvel Studios. He is also an audiobook narrator, lending his voice to books of all genres. A New Yorker since birth, George now lives in St. Louis, Missouri, with his wife and daughter. And I'm very excited to talk with him because there are other parts to this story. So I'm excited to hear from you. So I'm going to turn the camera over to you, George. Take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I am very honored that you asked me to be a guest here. Yes, my name is George Sirois. I've been writing very seriously since, I would say since 2008. I don't really count the first version of From Parts Unknown, since that was done in 2002. And that was more or less like kind of a tester to see how I would do in novel form, because previously I was writing screenplays and short films, things of that nature. And since nothing had really come of them, I decided to take the plunge and take one of my scripts and novelize it. And that became From Parts Unknown. And it's a story that's very, kind of near and dear to me, especially since I had gotten the rights back to it in 2011 from the printer that I worked with, iUniverse. And thankfully they were fine with giving me the rights back because it wasn't a big seller anyway. And when I looked through that, I realized that I didn't like it anymore. And so I spent several years basically just writing it from start to finish. And it became this much larger story, almost 3 times its original length. And it became so huge that I decided to turn it into a 5-part serial to make it a little bit more palatable, because it is a very niche kind of story. And the other books that I've written so far are Excelsior, which was originally written in 2000. Originally, the first draft was written in 2008. The first edition was released in 2010. That was a self-published version. It got picked up by a small press here in St. Louis in 2013. And then when that small press went out of business, another small press picked it up, and they went through another round of editing with me, and they relaunched a 3rd edition in 2017, which I'm immensely proud of. And that is, I can safely say, is the best that story is going to be. And I also spent 5 years working on its sequel, Ever Upward, Part 2 in the Excelsior Journey. And I am working on part 3 now, which is called Greater Glory, part 3 in the Excelsior journey. The first treatment slash outline slash draft, it's a whole mishmash of it, was written this past year. And I am going to be using National Novel Writing Month to bulk it up to an actual draft that I can work with, that my publisher will hopefully be pleased with. So, and in 2011, after living in New York for about 17 years, my wife and I decided that we were going to make the move from New York to St. Louis. St. Louis is where she's from, and we knew that we would need to be around family if we were going to start a family of our own. And because my family was the closest family member was almost 2 hours away. And so, so we decided to make this move. And at first, I was not happy. I was actually like pretty miserable. And it really was just like kind of taking me away from everything that I knew. And for that first 3 months, it was really difficult because I wasn't working yet. I was still studying for my master's. I was just doing some work from home, you can say home. My mother-in-law let us live there for a couple of years and until we got ourselves situated. And the first 3 months, it was really hard. Being in that brand new environment, not knowing anyone. I'd gone through that before in 88 when I was about 12 years old, and my mother, my sister, and I moved from New York to Richmond, Virginia. Those first 4 years were horrible for me because my self-confidence was in the toilet. It took a while for me to really kind of, get myself out of there and really find my niche, find my real calling at that time. But here in 2011, it was the same thing, but at the same time, it was just me and my wife was very familiar with her surroundings, and I was not. I wasn't even driving yet, and it was just bad. And
Why weren't you driving?
I tried driving when I was a sophomore in high school. I could not get used to it. I could not get the hang of it. And I knew that eventually I was going to go to college in New York City. So a car was going to be a secondary need. It wasn't going to be necessary for me to get around. And so from that whole time, I just decided I wasn't going to drive. I was going to get myself around however I needed to for the next couple of years. But once I was in New York, then the world was open to me. I could go anywhere I wanted, either by walking, by bus, by subway, whatever. And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, being able to basically just go where I wanted at that time, especially during my junior year in college when I got a job and started really bringing in some income that I could really work, use to get myself around. So,
well, my sister never got her license. She lives in upstate New York, Saranac Lake. She's she's almost 70. She's never cared about it.
Yeah.
I give her a lot of credit. I love it. And what were you getting your master's in?
I was going for Master of Arts in Communication.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And thankfully, 2012 is where things really, started to open up a little bit, because actually I need to back up a little bit, because November of 2011, during one specific day when I was so miserable, I was just at the bottom. I felt like I had hit rock bottom in terms of my mood, in terms of my thoughts, like everything. I didn't like who I was. I wasn't happy at all. And that it just turned out that night, that was when my wife gets the idea that we were going to go dancing. And when we went, we had gone to do some West Coast swing. She knew a West Coast swing club. She had been doing it at that time since she was a little kid. And she tried to get me into it while we were in New York City. And it didn't click. I wasn't able to make it happen. Even like watching instructional DVDs and getting, wanting to be involved in it. It's something that she really loved, and I really wanted to get it, but for some reason it just wasn't sinking in. So I knew the cadence, the walk, walk, triple step, but that was all I knew. So other people that were part of that club, they got me out on the dance floor, and all they wanted me to do was just feel the music, not do any moves, and just do the cadence. And it felt like it kind of shook something loose, because the very next week I took my first official lesson, and that's when everything really stuck. All of a sudden, like, I was hooked, and I was thrilled because all of a sudden we had something that I could do, that we can make it into a Friday night thing. And we did for quite a while. And that opened things up for me a lot. I was able to meet a lot more people, and all of a sudden, I felt like I was part of a community. And then it was the next year or so, that's when I realized that there was a thing called the Missouri Writers Guild. And at that time, I had the 2002 edition of From Parts Unknown, and I had the self-published version of Excelsior. And
could I ask you what the Parts Unknown book was about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm wearing a shirt that's actually promoting the main company that's at the center of it, the GCL, or the Gladiatorial Combat League. They are the last remaining sport in America, and it's all about a young man who wants to provide for his wife and child by being a part of the GCL roster. He has no idea how corrupt the GCL is behind the scenes. He has no idea that it's being used as a government tool of distraction, so that way everyone can basically just kind of focus on that while the government goes about its business. And he has no idea that the head booker of the company, the one that's trying to get the championship off of the current champion, he has developed a serum that will turn an ordinary man into a monster that can tear through the GCL ranks. And all he needs is a test subject, which my main character becomes. And it becomes a battle for him to hold on to whatever humanity he has left in a sport that is losing its humanity as it goes. So, yeah. And the funny thing is the government part of it wasn't even a factor until I had gotten the rights back from the novel. And that's when I realized what I could really do with this company and with this story, and really, see where it leads me. And it led me into some really good places, because I'm really, really proud of what it became.
That's great. Congratulations with that one.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. And then you learned about the Missouri Writers Guild.
Yes, and I did some digging, and I wound up submitting Excelsior to a small press that was based out of St. Louis, and they were looking for some new material. And I felt that by that point, I felt like I'd kind of hit the ceiling when it came to Excelsior. I felt like if I had someone else behind it, a different, like a publisher, then I could really kind of test its potential, and they can get it into more stores. They would have more connections than I would. And that wound up being the case, because the publisher that took it on, they were heavily involved in the Missouri Writers Guild. And as I got to know them, I realized just, wow, there is a huge writing community in St. Louis. And that's when things really opened up, especially in 2013, because that was when I was working regularly. I'd gotten my degree the year before. I'd gotten a job, and a really well-paying job, one that would allow us to actually put money down on a lot to have a house built. And then all of a sudden things really opened up, because all of a sudden, like, the confidence is flowing, and I'm working, and I'm contributing, and I'm dancing. By that point, I had actually won, placed in 2 competitions for West Coast Swing. And all of a sudden I was teaching beginners at that point. And I was writing more, because I was able to get things going, not only with the sequel for Excelsior, but I was still working on From Parts Unknown, and I was able to get a second edition of Excelsior up and running for this new publisher, and got a new cover design and everything. And it just felt like things were really going well.
That sounds like a great year.
It really was. It really, really was. 2013 was very good. Between, like, I would say the end of 2012, like August 2012 through all of 2013 was fabulous. Was
And
absolutely.
I feel like a butt is coming on.
Well, and as things, there are ebbs and flows, and um, even though I had in 2015, things were still going well for me physically. I actually lost a lot of weight in 2015, was feeling a lot better about myself. And I had even gotten to do some speaking at a couple of schools for Excelsior, and got to talk about writing to little kids, to elementary school kids. And it was just a great experience. It was
And
around this
what were you
time.
talking to the kids about? Writing or?
I was talking to them about how Excelsior came about. Excuse me. I was talking to them about how Excelsior came about, because what Excelsior is, and I can go into the main story later on, but it was a character that I created back in 1992. And it's part of a universe that I created back in 1985 when I was in 4th grade. So here I am speaking to students around that same grade and letting them know, hey, those ideas that you have, they may seem juvenile at first, and they were for me. I was able to do basically just box sketches. That was pretty much like as far as my artistic skills could take me, which they still are. And but at the same time, like, I was working on those because I knew I had something with them. And then in 1992, the character Excelsior came about, and that's when things really took off with that. And I really knew I had something there, and my English teacher in high school knew I had something there and was actually encouraging me to continue on with it. So it's something that I never forgot. And I even took a scene that was played out of real life and put that in the first Excelsior book.
You're very lucky about that too, that you had a teacher that was positive for you. Yeah, that was like 4th grade.
Yeah, it started out in 4th grade, and then it was in 12th grade when I was a senior in high school. That's when that specific English teacher read some of our journal entries, because we were all required to keep a journal and then turn it in every week, and she gets to look through it and see what we're thinking about, and we get to write about whatever we wanted. And I was talking about those characters, and I was just kind of mulling over what I was going to do with them. What kind of potential did they have? Would this be something worth continuing? And then she wanted to know the details about that world. So I'm like, okay. And I filled page after page of the whole story of everything that as it was at the time, and a lot of details on Excelsior. And
you're very lucky. You're very lucky that you had a teacher that believed in you, honestly, because words can be so powerful.
Oh yeah.
Like one sentence from that teacher, like, you know what, George, you have tremendous potential. Don't ever give up on your dream. Just that one sentence could have changed the whole direction.
She did more than just talk, because the scene that's in Excelsior in the first book, my main character is taking a look at his current grade. And at that point, if you got an 85 or above, then you were exempt from taking the final exam. And so when this was from real life, because I went up to the desk, I looked down at my grade, and it was an 83. And she looked at me and just said, I don't really want to give you the final, so let's call this a little Excelsior extra credit, and added 2 points to my final score.
Good job.
Boom, all of a sudden. And the funny thing is,
you know what? You did something. She didn't just give it to you.
Right.
It wasn't like a freebie.
And even better was, my mother was always getting on my case about those stupid characters that that I was filling my notebooks with, and then I got to go home that day and tell my mother that those stupid characters just bailed me out of a final exam. So it was an amazing feeling. And it was that first real time that I realized that, hey, I have something here. And at that time, though, like, things, as I said, like things ebb and flow, and there's always something that you're fighting off. And for me, that thing is something that I didn't even know was a thing until a few years ago. And that's called imposter syndrome.
And this is where, you told me about this during our
Yeah.
little discussion before I sat down with you. And
Yeah.
I'm very interested in this. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Imposter syndrome is the feeling that you get when you are so convinced that someone is going to basically tell on you and tell the world that you're a fraud, that you don't deserve what you have, and it's only a matter of time before it all goes away. And that feeling has stayed in me for quite some time. And when I really got involved in the writing community, not just in St. Louis, but also throughout the state of Missouri, because in 2016, the Missouri Writers Guild elected me to be the vice president / conference chair. I had never chaired a conference before. I had never held that kind of office before. And it just so happened that that particular conference I was not there for. So I didn't know that all of this was happening until I started seeing a couple of notes on my Facebook page saying congratulations. I was like, for what? And what happened was my publisher, who at that time was the president of the Missouri Writers Guild, I said to her, since she was getting ready for that conference, if there's anything I can do to help the board, let me know. Famous last words, because she said, she sends me an email that night saying, congrats, Mr. VP. And all of a sudden, I found myself on a whole different kind of journey that I did not for the life of me expect. And it's one of those things where, it's one of those moments where somebody kind of like taps you on the shoulder and says, you're worthy, you can do this. If I didn't think you can do it, you wouldn't be doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's happened to me several times throughout my life. That happened to me in English class, my senior year. It happened to me in drama class that senior year, when my drama teacher named me to get the faculty medallion for drama during the year that we graduated, because everyone gets the outstanding achievement noted over at our school, but if you're a senior, you get a nice medal. And I was given that medal, and nobody thought that it was going to be me getting it. They all were thinking about different names, different types of people and everything, different classmates, and they were throwing one name after another. No one mentioned me. And so it was an amazing feeling getting that sort of validation. And those types of those moments of validation, it's like getting the star in Super Mario Brothers. All of a sudden, you're just like zooming through everything. You don't feel like anything can touch you. But like the star in Super Mario Brothers, it fades, and then you go back to regular. And if you trip over the wrong thing, all of a sudden you're small again. And then you trip over something else and you're dead. So that's always in the back of my mind. Whenever something good happens, I always have that feeling that the other shoe is going to drop and something is going to happen to kind of level everything out.
Well, George, a lot of people feel that way, though.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've felt that. I feel like that comes from nurture versus nature, our upbringing, and also what's happening to us as we grow up. But so what's the difference between like imposter syndrome and like being like, I felt like that, like the ball's going to drop, or sometimes I feel like, oh my God, people are going to think I'm a fake. And it ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows and it goes away. But I've never heard of that label. Yeah,
that's very much of what it is. And that sort of feeling of, you don't deserve this, that is something that it turns out I had no idea how common that was. especially with people that are creative, because we are always, you and me,
Well,
just
I'm
like
not that
with
creative.
here. But
I'm not
you're
that creative.
creating something here. You're creating something here. You're creating an environment where people can share their stories. It's wonderfully therapeutic, and it's going to be something that I believe will help a whole lot of people.
Well,
And
it has, George, but I never,
exactly,
you know what? I thank you for that, because I really, and you know what? I am creative with, and I
yes,
said this
yeah,
when I did my last podcast yesterday or the day before, whatever it was, with my putting training things together for people. I'm a personal
mhm,
trainer, my
yeah,
yoga, I teach yoga.
hmm,
And I never really thought this as being creative,
yeah,
but you just brought light to it, because it has already helped a lot of people. I've had
yeah,
a lot of direct messages, a lot of people, and it's warmed my heart. So thank you for that. Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
and rightfully so. So I mean, it's something that is very common with a lot of us, with with all different types of creative forces, really, because I mean, it's not just being an author for me, it's also being a podcaster as well. And just getting that sort of feeling, like just doing something, putting something out there, you're stepping out into the spotlight and saying, I matter. What I am giving to you is of importance. And when you have imposter syndrome and anxiety and just really being really down on yourself and very self-effacing, it's like you're basically standing in the spotlight saying, like, I matter, what I do has value, but not much.
Yeah. You know what, George?
Yeah.
You're really bringing this lightning bulb in my head, because pretty much inevitably before I record a podcast, it may seem like maybe to some nothing, but
Yeah.
this is really stepping out of my comfort zone.
Hmm.
Extremely. I am outgoing, but I am an introvert also.
Yeah. Yeah.
But mostly me being on camera is
Hmm.
really hard, for a lot of reasons. I won't go into them. But what I do to avoid what you just said, because I would do that, I would like sink down into,
Hmm.
but not really. I
Yeah.
meditate. I'm a big meditator. I've meditated for 15 years now. So pretty much before every podcast, that's why I only schedule one for the day, honestly.
Yeah.
I've done two, but I don't really like to do that. I go into a very deep meditation,
Mm.
and I wipe away all of that negativity.
Yeah.
It just happens. I'm a really quote unquote good meditator, but
Right.
I feel so worthy
Yeah.
after. So
Yeah.
it really helps.
I
But
know what you mean about how doing two a day can be very trying, because I've been doing that quite a bit for my own, because I know that I'm going to be focusing on that first draft of Greater Glory in November. And so I wanted to get my November episodes all filled up and ready to go, so that way they can just go out there and I don't have to worry about recording during the month of November.
hmm hmm it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean,
It,
and
yeah,
for me, the way what I do, I don't know what your podcast is about. I apologize,
that's
but
okay.
we'll talk about that. You can
Yeah.
tell me. But for me, this podcast can be quite draining sometimes, just because we are talking about deep things sometimes,
Yeah.
very traumatic things sometimes. People, and what you said about therapeutic, and people can, my hashtag is time to tell your story, and
Hmm.
hashtag every story is important.
Yeah.
So whether that story is full of trauma and sadness and all of that, or it's happy or whatever, doesn't
Hmm.
matter. But
Yeah.
I take that all in. I'm a big energy kind of person. I do know how to kind of shield myself,
Right.
but it's a lot. It's a lot sometimes. So yeah. So I try to just
Yeah.
keep it to one at a time.
Yeah.
But yeah. So go ahead. So I'm sorry, interrupted you again, but I wanted to kind of
Okay.
weave my way in there. And then where were we at? Lost track.
Well, that's the funny thing, is that, like, I mean, my whole story just goes like all over the place. That's um but I will, like this would actually be like a good time to talk a little bit about Excelsior itself.
Okay.
Because like I was saying, at this point in 2013, the second edition was coming out, and I was doing some speaking for, for different, speaking I did my first speaking for an elementary school in 2013 when that second edition came out. I did more throughout the next couple of years, but that was the first time that I had done that. And for the launch of this second edition, it turns out it was in a bookstore because the publisher was also running a bookstore. So I got to have a book launch in a bookstore, and it was the first time that I had done that, the first time that it happened to me. And the store had a poster for the book in their window. And it was just an amazing, it felt, like I said before, validating. It felt so validating because having a publisher really means a lot to me. And there are a lot of authors that are out there that all stress indie authors, indie only. So that way, you self-publish it, you control it, it's your baby, you get the lion's share of the profits, over and over and over again. Totally understand that. And I totally agree with that when, for the right kind of book. When you have a publisher, in my opinion, what you have, it's not someone who's going to be taking like a bunch of, your royalties or anything. What they are going to take, what they are providing for you is a support system. They have your back. They are investing in you. And that means the world to me because it's that validation. Maybe that's something that I'm constantly striving for. Maybe that's the thing, that's been like that sort of driving force for me. Just getting,
well, George, I talk about that all the time too, as far as the pillars of good health and wellness and mind, body, and heart. And those who follow me will know the support system is way, 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 way up there. You need a good support system for anything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So.
Oh, absolutely. And but 2000, like I said, like going into throughout 2014, 2015, that was when things really started to be really interesting because I finished up at that time what I felt was the ending of From Parts Unknown. I had no idea that a few years later I was going to keep picking at it a little bit until it finally got to a place that I was legitimately happy with. But it was that was definitely an interesting point, time in 2015. Dropped like a bunch of weight, started feeling better about myself physically, and even got bumped up to a higher level in West Coast Swing. So now I was competing in a novice stage instead of newcomer. And that was incredibly validating as well, because it wasn't me who said, okay, I'm going to try novice. And if I did that myself and failed, then I was likely going to bump myself back down to newcomer and just be trying to like wallow in that level. But it was the powers that be for the competition that said, you're now a novice. And so again, keeping that theme going, validation, like somebody else, the powers that be and everything, they said, you are now in a place where you can dance novice. And I'm still there. Novice is a very difficult group to get out of because it's so packed with people. And I haven't really done much dancing in the past couple of years because of, a lot of different life getting in the way. Obviously COVID is, what it is. And so obviously dancing is out. But it was an amazing feeling. And it was around that point in 2015 that I suddenly found myself out of a job because the church where I was working at decided they wanted to change the position where I was working at to require ministerial experience, which I had none of. And all of a sudden I was no longer valid to have my own job. So I was, again, feeling pretty low. I had gotten a nice severance package I was happy about that. That kept me going for a while, and I was interviewing, and I was, putting myself out there. But I was also asking myself, what do I really want to do? What is it that's going to really kind of drive me? And there was the writing, obviously, but that wasn't going to be a full-time thing for me, not yet. And then all of a sudden I started watching this documentary on Amazon Prime called I Know That Voice. And that introduced me to basically, like, it reintroduced me to a whole world of different voice actors in animation telling their stories, how they got into this business. And that was something that was always appealed to me since I was a kid. I always wanted to be involved in animation in any way, like especially as a voice actor. And so I started thinking like, well, I need to get like some lessons. I need to get myself, in the position where I can actually go forward with this. And I reached out on Twitter and said, like, anyone in the hashtag St. Louis area, is there a place that does any sort of voice acting lessons? And someone responded to me and mentioned Clayton Studios, which was a studio that I had driven past all the time when I was working. Mm-hmm. And also, just a quick note, 2014, I got my driver's license. And all of a sudden, here I am actually driving. It's there. All that fear that I felt, gone. It went completely gone when I drove the first time on my own. All of a sudden, it was just like, I get the appeal. All of a sudden, I get it. And it became something wonderful for me. It became so freeing. And so in 2015, things were, like I said, losing weight, feeling good about myself, unemployed, but getting myself out there a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, here is this potential opportunity to take these kinds of lessons. I reached out to them and asked them what the details are. They gave me the price. It was not cheap. So I reached out to all my writer friends on social media and said, I will narrate 500 words for you for $10, 1,000 words for $20. And you can take that MP3, you can do whatever you want with it as a promotional tool. And with that, I was able to build up enough money to pay for those classes.
Nice.
Yeah. And so then all of a sudden you throw that in. Now all of a sudden, going through the lessons, getting my demos, and everything, all of a sudden voice acting. And then studio gets built downstairs in our home by my father-in-law, who did a terrific job with it. All of a sudden, boom. Now I'm starting to get into audiobook narrating because I pitched that idea to my publisher and said, can I narrate the first chapter of Excelsior? She gave me the green light. I went ahead and did it. And then she came back saying, I love it. Go for it. And so I got to narrate my own audiobook. And that's become a thing now. So it's kind of weird. It's one of those things where one opportunity kind of like led to another, then led to another, because it was being an author, sticking with it, that opened me up to the Missouri Writers Guild and the St. Louis writing community. Then all of a sudden, it wound up being voice acting, and then taking the voice acting, working it into audiobook narrating. So now author, audiobook narrator, that's together. Then it was, what else do I want to do? And then that's when, around that time, I was podcasting with a friend, and I realized that I wanted to kind of start my own show. And that became Excelsior Journeys, because that started out very simply. It was me looking through all my friends on social media and seeing, wow, I know a lot of talented people. They need to be on podcasts. They need to get themselves out there. They need to let the world know what they can do. And then after a couple of months, it was, they need to be on my show so I can tell them everyone what they can do. And that became Excelsior Journeys. And that was my friend that I podcasted with, looking at my banner, seeing the phrase, the Excelsior Journey, and said, like, well, what about that? I was like, yeah. And just put an S on there, Excelsior Journeys. And it became and that became a thing. And so now
I'm sure there's nobody else who has that.
Yeah.
In podcasting land. How long have you had this podcast?
I started it in October 2018. I took a hiatus from it during a big chunk of 2019 to 2020 because we were moving into a new house. This is our second home that we're in now, and it's a much bigger home. I have my own office. I can claim it as my own. I can decorate it however I wanted, which explains the, you know, all the clutter and stuff like on top of those shelves there. But it also, we're right outside my recording studio right here. And so that's where the show is done. That's where my audiobook narrating is done. And so I decided in May of 2020, during this whole, you know, chaos with, you know, with COVID, that I was gonna revisit the show. I was gonna get it back up and running. And I wound up doing a whole lot with that because the confidence of doing the show opened me up to reaching out to other people that I did not expect to be a part of the show. I did not expect to spend 2 hours talking with the screenwriter of Transformers the movie. And I didn't expect to talk to for an hour and a half with one of my favorite voice actors, Neil Ross. I did not expect that the composer of the score for Rocky IV and Transformers the movie would be coming on my show, but he's going to be there in December. So it's like, it's one of those things where you just don't want to question. You just want to, like, you want to nod, you want to smile, you want to accept the fact that they want to be on your show for a reason. And
so
then,
are you accepting that? Are you accepting that with the
I am.
imposter syndrome? Is that at bay now?
It's
like,
it's definitely held off. There will be times when it springs up. In 2018, I was put on medication for because I had lost my second job at that point, and my daughter was just born, and I was at like I thought I was low in 2011. I was miserable in January 2018. I was really, really bad, not good at all. I just felt lost, and that medication definitely, it didn't like, you know, push me up, but it propped me up, you know, and it basically just kind of like, I don't want to say nudged me, but it definitely kind of like, it kept me from staying on the floor.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. You know, medication isn't for everybody. Just like what I do for myself, as far as my quote unquote medication is everything that I do to keep me sane is my, you know, meditation, my yoga, my food, my exercise, my walking in nature, water, good sleep, you know, it's a lot. And I have to keep up on it. So it's the same kind of thing. I mean, we all have our thing, you know. As you were talking about your hiatus, I did the same thing. I mean, I only had 10 episodes that I did strictly health and wellness a year and a half ago. And then I took a hiatus, and then COVID happened. And then I was a guest on another person's podcast strictly for, I'm an RN holistic health coach. So I did 6 segments on his show talking about health and wellness every week. You know, it was really casual. It was great, but it got me going again in my head. Like, it was like, it sparked this up again.
Yeah.
So that's why I started again. And the connections that you made, I made COVID that was positive for me. Is that I have made so many awesome connections with people on the podcast, on TikTok, on, you know, like, just, I formed a platform on TikTok since COVID. Never thought I would ever do that, but it's been a very nice, supportive community. So, you know, I try to look at that glass half full with this whole thing going around, and you saying those connections, I try not to question them either. I just like, am so grateful for them.
Absolutely.
You know?
Like I said, I did not expect it, you know, but at the same time, I didn't expect that I would have the nerve to actually reach out to these people. It just so happened that one of my friends, one of my writing friends that I knew just on social media, I invited him to come on the show as like a last minute thing. And it was one of my best interviews. I felt like everything was relaxed. I was giving him the right questions. I was, feeding him some really good material and everything. And he was feeding me some amazing material. And he started talking to me after the show about some connections that he had. And one of them was with Gilbert Adler, who was a producer on Tales from the Crypt. And all of a sudden, a few weeks later, he's on my show. And he's talking to me for 2 hours. And it was just an amazing experience. And it was so much fun getting to talk to him. I never thought that I would have that. But
I know. George, listen, you're worthy. And I'm getting all these people from Facebook, and I purposely do not study them. I do not go into what they're doing, because I get intimidated. And I'm like, why? Why are they coming on my show? I don't understand. That's why I put on Facebook, you guys make sure you look at my YouTube channel first, so people can see that I'm just this gal sitting here with not the best lighting and not the best sound system and not the best camera, but just doing something because I want to do something from my heart. And those are the people that responded back to me. And then I was like, all right, this is good enough. I'll get a little short little bio. This way, I honestly don't know these people. And I'm glad, because I would be like too nervous, too intimidated. So don't even question it. You're worthy. And I'm worthy.
There you are.
So it's all good. It's all good.
It is. It really is.
So where are you now? Let's I try not to go longer than an hour, because people, unfortunately, attention span is not that great. So I want to know where you are now. I want to know last words of wisdom, anything you want to share with the audience before we part. Those things before we.
Okay. Well, like I said, right now I am ready to start the next draft of Greater Glory Part 3 in the Excelsior Journey. I am nearing episode 60 on the Excelsior Journeys podcast. I have narrated over 10 audiobooks. I'm actually narrating the fourth one that I'm doing for one of my clients. And it's been just a real pleasure working with him. And it's been, and I'm also in the process of applying to be a TEDx speaker, which I never thought that I was going to have the nerve to try that.
Wow, I would love to do that, George. Tell my story like on the stage there, but I don't, maybe in my next life. I don't know.
I already put out, I put out an application back in, back at the end of 2019, and they didn't have a space for me. But it was very encouraging, because my first application, my first time around, they responded back to me and said, do you think you can kind of like tinker it with it to make it a little bit more personal? We want to hear more of your story. And again, that validation feeling, because all of a sudden they're not just blowing me off. They want to hear more, and they want to hear more of me. So that was just like, yes, I will do this. And so I wasn't able to get in the first time. I am not sure what the future holds for TEDx now that COVID is what it is. I hope that it still goes back to its regular format and just adds in the elements of social distancing and wearing masks and everyone being safe, because having the opportunity to step out on that stage to tell my story, I mean, that's that right there. I mean, like, it's kind of like the movie The King's Speech, how the climax of that movie is the speech given by the king. And it's an amazing moment, and that's what this would be, really. If my life were a film, that would be its climax. Getting to do something like that.
That would be great. I'm hoping for you that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any last parting words for our audience, and then we'll talk about where they can get in touch with you.
that imposter syndrome voice, that voice in the back of your head that tells you you're not worthy, that tells you that sooner or later you're going to be found out, you're going to, you're just a fraud, you don't deserve what you're doing. You just go back to being a little shriveled up daisy. It is a fairly loud voice, but your own voice is louder. And all you have to do is you have to make sure that you are drowning out those voices with your own, because when you do that, you find your voice, and all of a sudden you start getting a little bit louder and a little bit more out there. And then that voice is going to start getting smaller and smaller. And it's just going to escalate more and more and more for you. And then sooner or later, you're going to find yourself actually being, actually getting the things that you always felt that you could get.
I love it. That's awesome. That was great parting words. That was great, George. Where can people get in touch with you?
They can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My Twitter and Instagram handles are George Sirois. And it's just one word, George, Sirois. And you can also find me on Facebook. You can find me on both my author page and the Excelsior Journeys page. And that's facebook.com/Excelsior Journeys podcast. There's another Excelsior Journeys one that's out there that hasn't been touched in a while, but Excelsior Journeys podcast is where you'll find me. And you can also find the show itself on Apple, Google, Spotify, TuneIn, Podbean, Stitcher, and just recently Amazon. So
right. And everybody, I'll have his information in the show notes. So don't worry about writing it down now. So just hang out for a second, George. So sure. This is my little spiel, everybody. And if you've heard it before, you could say goodbye or in the block out this. But anyway, all my information is going to be in the show notes. My Google phone number, if you want to share any tidbits with me that you want me to share on the show, if you want to be on the show, my Google number will be in the show notes, plus my website, plus all my podcast stuff, and everything's going to be there. I do talk about the Rawr Bar, RAWR. I am an affiliate and an ambassador. They do not sponsor me, but I believe in this company 100%. It's the only packaged good I eat. They are vegan, but they fit every diet. They have 18 to 21.5 grams of protein a bar. They are organic ingredients. They have no artificial sweeteners. They are put together by coconut oil, which is great for your brain. Sweetened by coconut nectar, blackstrap molasses, a little bit of Himalaya salt. 10% of their net proceeds go to feed the hungry children worldwide. Owned by husband and wife, young husband and wife, Jake and Rachel, based out of Minnesota. Love these people. They asked me to be ambassador, 8 months, 9 months ago. Believe in them 100%. Please support me and them. My affiliate link is below. Please purchase from that affiliate link. It helps me to try to keep this podcast going. Also, once you order, you get if you write a review, you get a 10% coupon. Use that coupon on the affiliate link. Keep using that affiliate link. It helps me, and I thank you very much. And on that note, thank you, George, for joining me. It was a pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I hope you have a beautiful day.
You too.
Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful and blessed day.